Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast, where talk is all about the West. This episode is brought to you by the Dude Ranchers Association and produced by Cowboy Spirit USA. Over 10,000 years ago, bears the size of horses stalked the earth. On their hind legs, they were over 10 feet tall. Author Mike Stark researched these powerful animals, even retracing their steps. Mike joins Russell and Allen to talk about his book, Chasing the Ghost Bear, as well as other books he has penned, including his new novel, Derelict Light.
Well, Alan, somehow we're in the middle of February, the middle of the first quarter, almost to rodeo. They're talking rodeo and rodeo parade, and we're only a month out from the Tucson Festival of Books, and there's snow all over the Catalinas.
Well, this may be the best time of the year. The desert has turned green, and the flowers aren't blooming yet, but they will be soon. And so some moisture that we've had is really welcome.
You know, it rained a little bit ago, and I said to my wife Laura, I said, "Well, gee, that's weird. It's not greening up." And it was not. The miracle of the desert. 2 days later.
Yeah,
White Stallion Range looked like a golf course.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is green.
Yeah.
So anyway, our guest today knows what we're talking about. Mike Stark's from Tucson. He's the creative director at the Center for Biological Diversity. He has a journalism degree from Southern Oregon University. He spent 15 years as a newspaper reporter and freelance writer in the West, including stints in Oregon, Wyoming, Montana. Those are Wyoming and Montana, that's our part of the country. And he was with the Associated Press in Salt Lake City. He's also the author of Wrecked in Yellowstone, Chasing the Ghost Bear, and his first novel, which was published in just past October, is The Derelict Light. And Mike's with us today. Welcome.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
I love your titles, Mike. This is Alan. These are the very descriptive titles for, Wrecked in Yellowstone and Chasing the Ghost Bear. If that doesn't get your attention, what will?
Right. Nothing I can do for you then if you don't like those.
Well, your book isn't about black or brown bears or polar bears. Tell us about the ghost bear.
Yeah. The ghost bear is the giant short-faced bear. And so this was the biggest bear that ever lived in North America. So it's bigger than the big Kodiak bears up in Alaska and bigger than the polar bears. This was a bear that lived during the Pleistocene in the Ice Age here in North America. And if you were unlucky enough to come face-to-face with it and you're about 6 feet tall, it would be looking you straight in the eye. And if it was up on its hind legs, it would probably be 10 feet tall, a little bit more, weighing over a ton, probably. So these were giant animals, and probably the biggest meat-eating mammal ever to be in North America. And they were from Alaska all the way down to parts of Florida, and a few here in the Southwest, a lot up in Alaska, but also parts of Montana and elsewhere. So this is a widespread, fast-moving, meat-eating giant bear in North America. It's incredible.
And your interest in him came from what?
Well, as you mentioned, I was a journalist for a long time, especially up in Montana and Wyoming. One of my jobs was covering Yellowstone National Park. Tough beat, but somebody's got to do it. And so I spent a lot of time writing about grizzly bears and, of course, wolves and other bears or other species up in Yellowstone. But one of my sources and friends up there was an ecologist, and I was out on a hike with him one day, and he was talking to me about different bear foods and talking about grizzly bears and black bears, and he said, and of course there used to be the giant short-faced bear here, which was, out-beared them all. And so that really stuck with me, and that really planted a seed in my mind, wondering who this bear was. And of course I went to learn more about it and to find a book about giant short-faced bears, and there wasn't one out there, so somebody had to fill in the gap.
So at a ton, or up to a ton, how's that compare to a big grizzly today?
They can be pretty close to that, or 1,000 pounds, 1,200 pounds, 1,500 pounds. So those aren't small bears. Those are really, really big bears, but these ones were just bigger, meatier, and taller.
And when do they think they went extinct?
Probably about 11,000 years ago, give or take. So that was right at the end of the Pleistocene. And that's when a lot of the super big mammals in North America were lost. So, those are also the mastodons and mammoths and saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, giant sloths, all those super big creatures that came to fruition during the Pleistocene. And they all went extinct, in a relatively short amount of time. What's
the current thinking about why? I've heard various theories about why all those went extinct. You want to?
Yeah, I mean, it's still, I think, an unsettled question. There are some people who believe that they were killed by hunting from people, that there was kind of a blitzkrieg across the continent after people arrived, wiping out all those big animals. Some say climate change, and the world was changing back then, and when the climate changes, the vegetation changes, and sometimes those big animals aren't able to adapt fast enough to the changing vegetation. Disease is another theory that's been tossed around out there, and as have kind of an extraterrestrial impact. A comet coming down and wiping out a lot of the habitat. So, all of these are still kind of discussed, and depending on who you're talking to, certain paleontologists have their favorite theories.
What's your favorite theory?
Well, my best guess is it was probably a combination. I really can't see where people would be able to hunt all of these big animals into extinction in a relatively short amount of time. It would just be very hard to do in a really uniform way. So I think that could have had to do with it, but I really think probably the changing temperatures and climate, the world changed around these animals pretty quickly, and they weren't able to adapt fast enough.
So, there's that whole Gordon Hancock, Younger Dryas, you mentioned the comet, right? In that same sort of era. Is that what you're saying? One of the theories is the fragments of the comet, and then had that really dramatic, relatively sudden climate change effect?
Yep, exactly. Yep, that's one of them. And also just, there was a cooling period that happened right around then as well. That was pretty severe, and so that may have been the last blow. And
so I've read on the mammoth mastodon side that there was the whole theory that humans got really good at killing them, and they caused the at least a significant role in the extinction. So is the thinking that the bears became prey to humans, or was it that the humans killed their prey, which could they kill a mastodon or a mammoth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more the latter. I think that, tangling with one of these big, giant, short-faced bears was probably not a proposition many hunters wanted to take up at the time. Yeah, I mean, these were huge, huge animals, and they had, primitive weapons, and so I think you're going to go look for some smaller thing to hunt.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I think the idea would be that, if you think about the hunting thing, they would say that the prey base was wiped out, and that was a key food for these bears, and that the bears were diminished because their food groups were diminished. But I don't know. I'm pretty skeptical of that still.
Mm-hmm. So they were all over North America, in essence. You said even in the Southwest there were a few, down to Florida, all the way up to Alaska. Did you go to some of the hot spots for this bear?
I did. I did quite a fair bit of traveling for this book. One of the first places I went was there's a cave in Northern California in the Shasta Mountains called the Potter Creek Cave. And this is where the first skeleton of a giant short-faced bear was found in 1879. And so I took a trip in there with a couple of folks who knew where they were going and what they were doing, and got a chance to see that spot.
Were there a lot of remains there, or just a few bones, or what?
Yeah, I mean, there had been, the cave had been pretty well excavated of bones in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was a real treasure trove of bones back then. So there's not much left in terms of the Pleistocene specimens there.
So was that just looters, for lack of a better word, and so that stuff's lost?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is in museums now.
Oh, okay. That's good.
In places like Berkeley and other places, yeah. I mean, a lot of those artifacts were carefully cataloged, and so you can still go see them in other places. So I went there. I went to there's a place in Indiana where in 1967 there was a backhoe working on putting in a new gas line, and they uncovered. At first, they thought a couple bones, and then what they ended up finding was the most complete specimen ever of our giant short-faced bear was uncovered in this trench. And so I went out there to look at that site, and those bones are up in the Field Museum in Chicago. So I went up and saw those and spent some time with some paleontologists out there.
What surprised you the most in all your research?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things was, what complex lives these bears led. Bears are amazing, adaptable, omnivorous beasts, and giant short-faced bears were pretty emblematic of that. So they lived in a ton of different kinds of environments, forested, unforested, dry, wet, and adapted their diets accordingly. In some areas, scientists have found they were more plant eaters. In some areas where they lived, they were more meat eaters. And so just kind of understanding how complex they were in order to adapt to their environment. We really, I think, don't fully appreciate the complexity of wildlife, but in particular for this context, the complexity of bears and their ability to live in all sorts of places and find a way to make a living. So
you visited the La Brea tar pits outside L.A., or in L.A. really, I guess. Explain why you did that. What was?
Yeah, it was a great trip. So La Brea it's kind of like stepping into a time machine and going back to the Pleistocene. So yeah, it's right there in the middle of downtown Los Angeles. There are still tar pits. There's still tar bubbling up into the lawn outside of the museum there, and so really, that's a place where, during the Pleistocene, for 50,000, 60,000 years, animals would walk to the tar pits. Sometimes they would think it was water or something and step in there. And, if they were stepping in a few inches or a foot of this gummy tar, they would get stuck and start crying out. And then another animal, usually a predator, would hear that and come and think they can get an easy snack and step into the tar pit to try to get that animal and then get stuck themselves. And so, you have thousands of years of all of these animals being trapped there, and eventually their bones being well preserved in this tar. And so they've been pulling these bones out for the last 120 years or so. And so it's a really great snapshot of what animals were there during the Pleistocene. And so there were probably about 2,000 saber-toothed cats, specific specimens that have been found there. Another
That's
1,500.
amazing.
Yeah, there's about 1,500 dire wolf individuals there.
Wow.
And then there's about 30 giant short-faced bears. And so it's really the most concentrated collection of giant short-faced bear remains in one spot. And so that's why I went there. I just wanted to see it all in person, look at the tar pits, but also was able to go back, kind of backstage behind the museum into the storage rooms and look at a lot of their bones and talk to a lot of their scientists there. So it's a great trip.
A stupid question, but you're out traipsing in the forest one day and you run across the bear. Is it going to be short-faced or long-faced? Which one is?
You mean a
left
modern
here?
bear? Is that?
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to define that.
Yeah, those will be, longer snouts. So these bears I'm talking about, the short-faced bears, had shorter snouts, not like a pug dog, but not like a long snout like a grizzly bear. So, and these were also trimmer bears. These were, in some ways they had more of a cat-like body. They were giant, but they were slender. They weren't. They didn't have the big rumps like grizzly bears do. So this was, not quite your typical bear you'd see today.
So before we take our break, were the giant short-faced bears an evolutionary dead end? Or is there thinking that one of the existing species of bears are their descendants in some way?
Yeah, I think mostly a dead end here. They are related to there's a spectacled bear in South America where it might be related. There's some common genes there, but yeah, no other. There was also a lesser short-faced bear that was mostly in the southeast. It was smaller. But really, once those two species died out, the sort of short-faced bear, that kind of branch of that bear family in North America died out.
So it's fair to say maybe then grizzlies and blacks have common heritage backward with the short face, but that species was a dead end. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, but it goes back a ways. The grizzly bears and the black bears are part of the Ursus bear family, and these are giant short-faced bears as part of the Tremarctine bear family. So they do go back, but it's a ways back there on the family tree.
It's quite a ways back. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, with that, we'll take a break.
Hello, this is historian and writer Lynn Downey. I'm the author of American Dude Ranch, A Touch of the Cowboy and the Thrill of the West, and the new novel Dude or Die, and I've stayed at ranches in Arizona and Montana. Can you tell I'm a fan of dude ranching? Well, I'm also a big fan of the Dude Ranchers Association. Now in its 98th year, this organization supports over 90 dude ranches around the West, and they offer every kind of Western vacation experience a dude or dudine could hope for. Outdoor adventure types can go rock climbing, rope cattle, ride ATVs, and go whitewater rafting. Want a honeymoon you'll remember forever? Go to a dude ranch. Kids love the activities offered at dude ranches, especially the horses. There's no better place for a girlfriend, cowgirl weekend getaway. The Dude Ranchers Association makes this possible for all of us, and they live every day by their core principles: horses, hats, hospitality, heritage, honesty, and heart. And we thank them for sponsoring the Cowboy Up podcast. Check out their website at duderanch.org.
Mike, let's turn to your work right now with the Center for Biological Diversity.
Sure, sounds good.
Tell us a little bit about the organization and what your role there is.
Yeah, well, the Center for Biological Diversity is based here in Tucson, Arizona. It started in the Southwest. So we're a national environmental group that's really focused on saving endangered species and the places they live. And so we do a lot of work with the Endangered Species Act. So we work on trying to protect wolves and bears and sea turtles and whales and butterflies and birds. Basically, all of those species that are really struggling to continue to survive as the world changes around them. And we, our focus is really trying to make sure that, they have a chance to play their role in providing, the wild for our planet. So we're really focused on trying to ensure a future where as many of these species that we see around today are around for future generations.
Go ahead.
Do you want to tell us a story about your favorite project or your favorite animal or your favorite something you helped save?
Sure. So I'm the creative director here at the center, and so part of my job is just trying to get people to understand, the disappearing world around us in terms of wildlife, and trying to get them not only to be engaged with that, but that there is a different, future to be had here. So, and we try not to be a bummer. So many environmental issues are really hard, and we acknowledge that. But I think also what we try to do is invest people in loving the world around them and the planet and all these amazing creatures. So I just finished an art project with one of our partners called Protectors, and it's just about each piece of art features one endangered species and then a similar extinct species, and then also a human being that's trying to save that extinct species that's still out there now. And so it's sort of a really cool art. It's a mix of like really cool art with education and finding ways for people to engage at whatever level they want to in trying to save these species.
When you look at a species, do you have a category that they would fit in as to extreme, they're about to go, or there's a lot of them left, or how do you categorize that?
Yeah, I mean, so there are a lot of super smart scientists, people way smarter than me that look at that and sort of understand the population dynamics. But in some cases, there are species where there are fewer than 10 left on the planet, like down in the Gulf of California, in Mexico, there's a little porpoise called the vaquita, and that's just right on the razor's edge of extinction, and so there are 10 left there, and so that's an extreme situation. But you can also look at something like monarch butterflies, where there are a ton of monarch butterflies. They were once a really common species, but their populations have plummeted 80 to 90% in the last decade or two. And so while there are still monarch butterflies to see, we see that trend as really, really disturbing and troubling. And so, while they're not down to 10, they're in a downward spiral. And so we're, part of our work is advocating for them to get the help they need.
So to sort of, but not really, change tacks, my wife and I spent, we reopened after 83 years the OTO, which is a Forest Service owned historic dude ranch outside Gardner, which is, of course, as you know, 11 miles from, Gardner is a entry point to Yellowstone with the old Rockefeller or Roosevelt Arch. And our dude ranch was the dude ranch where we were working was 11 miles out of there. And so we learned, we're here in Arizona. We learned a lot about Yellowstone, and that whole ecosystem is the largest unspoiled, we're told, area in the U.S. And so it's a big part of preserving species and environment and everything else. You wrote a book, Wrecked in Yellowstone. What's that about?
I did. Yellowstone's one of my favorite places on the planet, and so y'all are lucky to be spending the time up there you are when you can get up there.
Yeah, no kidding.
Can't get enough of it. Yeah, so this is a history book, Wrecked in Yellowstone. It's a story about this kind of funny guy in the late 1800s who decided he wanted to have a boat business there on Yellowstone Lake, the huge lake that's kind of in the heart of the park.
Yeah.
And he brought it. He bought a boat and brought it in pieces to Yellowstone, and then put it together piece by piece there on the Yellowstone shore of Yellowstone Lake. The only problem was everybody hated him, and he had no friends, and he just could not seem to get along with people who ran the park, with his customers.
What did he do with the boat? Did he take customers out for joy rides, or what was the purpose of the boat?
Yeah, exactly. So he had a steamboat on the lake, and so they went out and toured around the islands out there. Incredible views of the mountains while you're out there. For a while, he set up a little zoo on one of the islands in the middle of the lake, and so you pay him a few bucks. Yeah, different times. And he, of course, ran that very poorly, and customers complained about how maltreated those animals were out there. And so, over the years, he made too many enemies and had such a bad reputation that Teddy Roosevelt ended up kicking him out of the park. And the ship that was named after himself, of course, ended up it was moored there on one of the islands, and it's now a shipwreck on an island out there in the lake. And so if you take one of the boat tours, which are now much more organized and safe and all of that, you can still go out there and see the wreckage of his boat.
So it's on the shore, or just kind of sticking up out of the water, or?
Yeah, it's on the shore of this island called Stevenson Island out there. It's kind of like dug into the sand, so some of it's submerged and some of it is visible
Oh my gosh.
on the shore. Yeah.
I got to go
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be at Blackwater Creek Ranch, which is outside the Cody entrance into Yellowstone, the east entrance. So we're going to have to get over there and see that. Well, let's talk about your novel, The Derelict Light.
Yeah. As you may be able to tell, I love history and I love kind of understanding, seeing our world today through historic lenses. And so this is another piece of history. So one of the stops along my journey was in Astoria, Oregon, which is right there on the Oregon coast where the Columbia River drains into the Pacific Ocean. And so this novel is about Astoria. It takes place in 1922. That was the year that there was a fire in town that destroyed 32 blocks of the city, just wiped out almost the whole thing in a few hours. And really, this novel is about all of the different social currents that were flowing through the city at the time. And so there were, of course, a lot of fishermen and loggers there. But a lot of immigrants, especially Finnish immigrants, and there was a whole socialist movement among the Finns there. And then also around that time, the Ku Klux Klan had come to town. That was part of, 1920s was part of a resurgence of the Klan
In Oregon?
in Oregon of all places.
As well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty shocking. But they came in and so there was a national newspaper for the Klan that was based out of Astoria. And then a few blocks away, there was a national newspaper for the Finnish socialist movement. And so very strange kind of neighbors there in town. And
are they still there? Did it do itself in, or what's happened?
Yeah, I mean the Klan, as it should have, did flame out pretty quickly after the fire, and that wasn't really the cause of its demise, but that was happening right around the same time. But yeah, so that whole piece of history, the Klan, those people moved on, but there is still a huge Scandinavian community and Finnish community in Astoria.
Interesting. So what's the story of the book?
Yeah, so the thrust is, this fire has burned the city to the ground, and to try to sort it out is the state's only female fire inspector, and her job is to try to figure out who done it and how did this all happen. And so in the book, you're following her as she kind of goes through these different cultural parts of the city, talking with the Klan, the Finns. There was a big Chinese community there as well. And so her job is to kind of unravel exactly what happened with the fire back in 1922. It's based on real events. There was really a big fire there. A lot of the book is based on some real people, a lot of real events. But, in actuality, the fire, it was determined that it was arson, but they never really were able to pin it on anybody. And so I decided to tell my own story of what I think could have happened.
Excellent.
So what took you to that spot to center your novel there? What drug you there?
Well, when I worked there for a couple of years at the newspaper, and so I covered the fishing industry and the river and the coast, and living out there. And I really loved being there. It's an incredible place, especially if you like rain, which I do. And you're sort of like being at the very edge of the continent. So, things are just a little bit weird. It's kind of dark and rainy and a little bit surreal. And so, it just felt like the right place for a novel.
Just kind of dark, and it's a little bit of a dark novel, I'm guessing.
It is. Yeah, for sure.
Quick question. Were you ready to leave there when you left, or was that a happy part of your life? How did that fit in with other parts of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it being there, and I go every time I'm in the Northwest. I always try to go to Astoria, so I fondly remember it there. But I was young. I was a journalist then, and so at the time, part of the gig was just your workplace for a few years, and then you move on to something else and move on to something else. So I wasn't really, I don't know. I was glad to leave to go to the next thing, but I still love the place.
Yeah, perfect.
What has been your most engaging project? Can you pick one?
I think the bear book so far has been my most engaging, just because I did so much travel and reading and research for that. And it was to the point where it was, the bear was showing up in my dreams, and, it was everywhere I turned, I felt like I was seeing a bear and wondering if there was a bear near me. So that, it was a little bit of an obsession.
Well, have you come face to face with a bunch of bears in your life? Are you drawn to that? What takes you to that point?
Well, I mean, I have, I haven't had any dangerous encounters per se, but I've certainly been out hiking and seen grizzlies, and obviously in the Yellowstone area, and then up around Missoula, a lot of grizzlies up there I've seen, and black bears. So, part of it is, for me with bears, I think there's a whole kind of cultural connection that humans have with bears that I really have internalized, that, they're fairly similar to us in some ways, how they act and behave and sometimes look and express themselves. And so, I don't know. I've always had this very close kind of kinship with them.
Well, and bears have a wide variety of diets, just like people.
Exactly.
So,
taste.
you've got, so Mike, you've got a new book you're working on.
I do. Yeah. I've got, a book that's going to come out in the spring of 2025. At least that's what the schedule says, about, how European starlings became the most hated bird in America. And so, again, it's another kind of historical look at a species, and this is a look at starlings. They were brought to this country in the late 1800s, by a rich guy in Manhattan who thought it'd be fun to have some starlings in Central Park. And a few decades later, fast forward, and there's 200 million of them, and they're all across the country and making a mess and making people mad. And we've kind of been locked in a forever war with him ever since.
Wow. Good example of where, particularly in that era, right? The 1800s, where people just, horrible decision maybe in the context of today, but they just, hey, we have starlings in Europe. Let's have some in Central Park. Looks like a good idea.
The law of unintended consequences always comes home to roost.
Yeah, it sure does. I guess we got a better handle on that today.
Well, I hope so. I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah, maybe. Some people have them. So you're going to be you're a Tucsonan, and you're going to be at the Festival of Books in March. And
I will.
Are you talking about the novel or all the books, or what's the plan on that?
So I'll just be talking about the Derelict Light, the new novel about Astoria. I was there last year and did a couple panels on the bear book. So yeah, I'll be speaking on Saturday on a panel at 1:00 in the Student Union, and then I'm coming back on Sunday for another panel at 2:30.
Perfect. So people, a lot of our folks are from Tucson, so they can look for you at the Festival of Books coming up in March 9th and 10th, and always at the U of A, and one of the biggest, I think, last I read, third biggest book festival in the U.S. So
it's the best.
Maybe we'll catch you there, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me. Love the conversation. Appreciate it.
We've enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Lynn. Mike, Russell, Alan, and Lynn brought the program to you today. And thank you for being a part of the program. Please recommend us to others and tell your friends. I'm Stan, and I'm the leader of the Cowboy Spirit USA. That's part of What It Takes Radio, a international podcasting and publishing company. And let me tell you that we're planning more in 24. Bob Bosbell and Stuart Rosebrook are going to be here. They're men who know the history of the West. And here we go. Tales of Old Tombstone is the program that'll soon be on the air. and we think you'll find it not only educational, enjoyable, you'll learn more here by accident than most places by design. So please stay tuned. We will soon be on your way with a variety of new programs, starting with A Town That Couldn't Die, the story of Tombstone, Arizona.
You know, I was looking here, Alan, and Mike Stark has University of Nebraska Press as his publisher, and that's your publisher.
They've been good to me. Yeah, they've published my book.
Right, and I'm looking here. Lynn has updated me that at Stack's Book Club, which is in Oro Valley, great place to go, February 22nd, so just around the corner, 4 to 8 p.m. You're going to be there doing an appearance and with the book and signing and talking and telling stories, I'm sure.
Who knows? Might be a dozen people there. I hope.
That'll be that's going to be a lot more than that. So, good deal.
Yeah.
Thank you, animal lovers and others, for joining us today. A shout out to the amazing Stan Houston and his production company. Next week, our talk turns to the Old West with historian Bill Markley. For now, we leave you with a tune by Jim Jones, co-written with his friend Randy Brown, titled The Queen is Dead. And yes, it's about a bear. I'm Lynn Wheezy Sneed, reminding you to sit tall and ride safe.
High up in the South San Juan there lived a kingless queen, the last monarch of that wilderness, solitary, seldom seen. Through endless cycles of the moon she'd hunt by pale thin light. She was weary, old, and so alone, the last one of her kind. Then people came in raucous waves with their guns and fire and noise. A proud recluse, she'd hide herself from these fools who would destroy. A hunter found her in her lair, pierced her with his bow. Blinded by the pain, she ran to the forest far below. She's gone now from South San Juan, no more to be seen. The queen is dead, the queen is dead, long live the queen. Searching for the guilty one who'd caused this grievous wound, running blind she came upon a stranger in the gloom. Was he the villain or a victim? There's no way to know, but she attacked the battle joined, he struck the fatal blow. She's gone now from South San Juan, no more to be seen. The queen is dead, the queen is dead, long live the queen. I pray one day her kind returns to rule the mountains once again. But until we value wilderness, her grisly tale has reached an end. and she's gone now from South San Juan, no more to be seen. The Queen is dead, the Queen is dead, long live the Queen. The Queen is dead, the Queen is dead. Long live the Queen.